Why hydrogen?
Why hydrogen?
Why hydrogen?
Because hydrogen can change the world.
Japan is building a nationwide fuel network for a car you can go weeks without spotting. Not a battery EV, not a plug-in hybrid, a hydrogen car. That sounds backward until you see what Japan is really buying with hydrogen. Because this isn't a story about one sedan. It's a story about energy security, industrial survival, and a country that hates single points of failure. By the end, you'll know why Japan keeps pushing hydrogen cars even as battery EVs dominate headlines, and why the car is only the visible tip of the plan. But there's one problem nobody can dodge: the math. After the 2011 Fukushima disaster, Japan's energy system shifted hard. More fuel had to be imported, and the fear of supply shocks went from academic to personal. Japan's own energy agency reported that its energy self-sufficiency rate was 15.2% in FY 2023, one of the lowest among advanced economies. A government brochure put FY 2022 at 12.6%. At the same time, Japan has a net zero by 2050 goal, and its power mix is still heavily thermal generation. So Japan chose a third lever alongside renewables and nuclear: clean molecules. Hydrogen, and a close cousin that's easier to ship: ammonia. Japan's basic hydrogen strategy began in 2017 and was updated in 2023 with larger supply chain goals. Then, in May 2024, Japan enacted the Hydrogen Society Promotion Act, creating a framework to promote low-carbon hydrogen and its derivatives at scale. And that's where the plan stops sounding like a science project and starts sounding like industrial policy. Because the next part is where Japan goes all in. Japan's official documents don't treat hydrogen like a niche fuel. They attach deadlines. Infrastructure, the policy goal is around 1,000 hydrogen refueling stations by FY 2030. Supply, Japan's energy plan materials reference ramping hydrogen and ammonia supply to about 3 million tons per year by 2030, 12 million by 2040, and 20 million by 2050. Money, because hydrogen is still expensive, Japan's energy policy explainers describe support measures on the order of 3 trillion yen focused on bridging the price gap for hydrogen and its derivatives, including overseas production and transport. Those 3 lines, stations, supply, subsidies, tell you Japan isn't testing hydrogen. Japan is trying to manufacture a market. And this is where the story flips. Hydrogen cars are not the end goal. They're the easiest way to make the whole system visible. Except the system only works if the fuel itself can scale. Japan's biggest vulnerability is not technology, it's dependence. Fuel arrives by ship. If global prices spike, Japan feels it. If supply chains break, Japan feels it. If geopolitics shifts, Japan feels it. Hydrogen is a different kind of fuel bet. Because hydrogen can be produced in many places using natural gas with carbon capture, using renewables or other pathways, and then shipped as hydrogen carriers, like ammonia. That's why Japan keeps pairing hydrogen with ammonia, and you can see it in real deals. In December 2025, Reuters reported that Japan's largest power generator, JERA, secured a long-term government subsidy tied to importing low-carbon ammonia from a U.S. project planned to start deliveries around 2029. With ammonia used for co-firing at a power plant. Mitsui also described certification under Japan's price gap support system for a U.S. low-carbon ammonia project. Translation: Japan wants clean molecules to become as tradable and dependable as LNG. So why does the debate keep circling back to hydrogen cars? Because cars connect the abstract plan to everyday life and to Japan's most powerful industry. But the reason cars matter is about to get even more complicated. Japan's carmakers are world-class at making efficient machines at huge scale. Hydrogen fuel cells let them keep using what they're good at: manufacturing, durability, fast refueling experiences, and long-range mobility. Toyota's public statements frame hydrogen as part of a multi-pathways approach to carbon neutrality, especially for sectors like heavy-duty transport, where batteries can be hard to deploy. There's also a systems argument. If Japan builds hydrogen stations, those stations can later serve buses, trucks, delivery fleets, and even emergency power equipment. A station built for cars is a seed for bigger use cases. But there's a second reason that's about to be more strategic. In a battery-only future, the critical choke points are batteries, minerals, and manufacturing scale. Japan doesn't want its next industrial chapter to depend on one supply chain it can't fully control. Hydrogen tech, fuel cells, high-pressure tanks, hydrogen logistics, and ammonia handling creates a different leadership lane. Hydrogen cars keep that lane alive, even when sales are small. And now we hit the part most videos avoid. Because hydrogen cars don't lose on vibes, they lose on physics and economics. And this is where the story either breaks or gets smarter. A battery EV uses electricity directly. A hydrogen car usually uses electricity to make hydrogen, then compresses or liquefies it, ships it, stores it, and finally turns it back into electricity in a fuel cell. Each step wastes energy. Peer-reviewed reviews summarize that battery EVs use a high share of stored electricity into motion, while fuel cell vehicles face higher losses due to hydrogen production and conversion. That's why for normal commuting, battery EVs are usually the simplest path. Plug in, charge, drive. Hydrogen also has a scaling problem. Stations are expensive and complex. If too few vehicles use them, the economics look ugly. And if too few stations exist, buyers stay away. Japan has tried to break this loop with coordinated station rollout. Some public trackers still cite Japan with roughly around 160 hydrogen stations in operation around 2023 to 2024, depending on the counting method, while policy goals aim far higher by 2030. So why keep pushing a technology with headwinds? Because Japan is not trying to win everyday city commuting with hydrogen. Japan is trying to win the cases where the battery advantage shrinks. And those cases are bigger than most people think. Hydrogen's advantages show up when time and weight matter. Fast refueling is valuable for commercial fleets that run all day. Weight matters for heavy-duty vehicles where giant batteries can cut payload. Some routes and duty cycles don't match charging schedules easily. That's why Toyota keeps emphasizing heavy-duty and commercial applications in its hydrogen messaging, and why Japan's policies place hydrogen inside a wider industrial plan instead of treating it as a passenger car-only solution. Hydrogen also connects to resilience. Fuel cells can provide electricity, and Japan is a country that plans for disasters. The idea of a fuel network that can support mobility and backup power is politically attractive, even if it's hard to price that value. But there's a condition that decides whether this bet is smart or just stubborn. Hydrogen only helps if the supply is truly low carbon. Hydrogen has no tailpipe emissions in a fuel cell vehicle, but hydrogen is not automatically clean. The International Energy Agency notes that most hydrogen used globally today is still produced from fossil fuels, and scaling low-emissions hydrogen is the real bottleneck. So Japan's hydrogen strategy has two races running at once. Race 1, build demand and infrastructure. Race 2, clean up the supply. If Japan builds stations and vehicles without low-carbon supply, it risks moving emissions upstream instead of eliminating them. That's why the policy focus on supply chains and price gap support matters. And it sets up the final question. What should you watch to know if Japan's hydrogen car bet is working? Watch the 2030 checkpoint. Japan's documents point to around 1,000 stations and around 3 million tons per year of hydrogen and ammonia supply by 2030. Watch the subsidy pipeline. Japan's Hydrogen Society Promotion Act and related policy explainers describe price cap support on the order of 3 trillion yen, designed to make early projects financeable. Watch the import contracts and certifications. The 2025 ammonia projects tied to Japan's subsidy mechanisms are a signal of whether clean molecules trade can scale by the late 2020s. And watch the uncomfortable metrics: station uptime, hydrogen price, verified carbon intensity. If those don't improve, hydrogen cars stay niche. If they do, the story changes fast. Japan isn't betting everything on hydrogen cars because it thinks hydrogen sedans will beat EVs everywhere. Japan is betting on hydrogen because hydrogen is an energy strategy disguised as a car debate. It's a plan to import cleaner fuel in molecule form, store it, and use it across parts of the economy that are hard to electrify. Hydrogen cars are the public-facing proof of concept. If Japan succeeds, the real winners may be trucks, ports, factories, and power plants. If Japan fails, hydrogen cars will be remembered as the expensive billboard for an infrastructure that never scaled. Either way, the bet makes one thing clear: Japan is not choosing a single future. Japan is trying to build options before the world forces a choice.